everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy, joined by my co-host, Rob Dunham.
You're very tired, co-host. You need to sleep.
Yes, we are recording later in the evening because that's when we could this week. But we needed to bring it to you, the fans, on this
Anything for
Christmas
the fans.
week.
Yes.
What was that?
Anything for the fans.
Anything for the fans. That's right. That's right. And for the fans, we will have an excellent episode for you. We will, of course, do our box office update. We will do a full breakdown on Avatar: The Way of Water. We'll talk a little bit about our Christmas family plans and traditions and, just have a general Christmas discussion, even though it may not directly be movie related. And we will, of course, delve into our watch list. All right, Rob, let's get it rolling. Box office. To the surprise of nobody, because it had absolutely zero competition, Avatar: The Way of Water comes in at number one overall at 134.1 million in its opening weekend. That was followed by Black Panther, knocked off for the first time in a month at 5.3 million, Violent Night at 5.1 million, Strange World at 2.2 million, and The Menu at 1.6. These are actually also the only five movies that made at least $1 million at the box office this weekend. So obviously the big deal is the number for Avatar. It was a foregone conclusion it would be number one. But we'll see. What the number came out to was 134. Now that both of us went way over on our estimates on this, but Rob at 175, me at 190, I think. So technically Rob wins because he was closer, but neither one of us were really that close. It came in below projections. Projections were 150 to 175. It missed that. Not a terrible result. Rob, what do you make of the figure for Avatar: Way of Water?
So there was an article I think that we'll link in the comments talking about the box office for this movie and the fact that a lot of the pre-sale for the movie was for the week beyond it opening. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Christmas is this weekend.
Yeah.
So this might be a movie that actually has a very solid week one to week two with not a huge drop off. Certainly not as big as most movies, I think. And I think a lot of that is going to have to do with the fact that it's in premium formats. I went and saw it Monday night, so my showing didn't count towards the box office.
Yeah,
and I was in an IMAX. I was in an IMAX 3D showing, and it was sold out. And that was Monday night. So I think it's going to continue to make money for several weeks. So I don't think it's the end of the world that it came in below the projections. I'm still a little surprised it came in below the projections. But I think it's a movie that will still make a lot of money. I mean, it's already made, if you count the global box office along with it, it's already over $450 million at time of recording. Might be over 500 million at time of recording. It was 435 in that article we linked.
Yeah.
That was Sunday. So I don't think they have to worry too much about it getting its budget back.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I think you're mostly right on that. And it is an interesting release in that it doesn't come out the week of Christmas. It comes out the week before Christmas. Where I think the negative for this is there was basically absolutely nothing in the run up for several weeks. So not only did it have the box office basically all to itself this weekend, but they basically had no competition for the last couple weeks. So there was a very long run up to this movie, and then it had the weekend all to itself, and it still missed its projections. So that's the negative. The plus side is lots of people like to go to movies on Christmas. Christmas is on a weekend this year, so you're going to get multiple days, including Monday is Christmas Monday. So you're going to have an extended long weekend for Christmas for people to hit the box office. Plus, a significant amount of people will have off the week between Christmas and New Year's. So not only does it have the long run up, it's going to have a long tail coming to it. So I guess the big question is what is it going to do this weekend? I think if you see a significant drop off this weekend, I think you can get the sense that this is not going to perform as well as they anticipated. If you don't, then I think you're well on the way to it performing as the studio would have hoped. But remains to be seen, and we will do a full breakdown on the movie itself uh, in our discussion section. But anything else to say about the box office or about Avatar's number?
Not really. Just good to see still Violent Night and the Menu, especially
Mm-hmm.
the Menu, still performing and making money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's both those movies did quite well, I think, especially for the Menu was had a fairly limited run in theaters in terms of like the amount of theaters it was in. So I think it's performed quite well given those circumstances. Okay, now we have two main movies opening Christmas weekend. That will be the 23rd this Friday. Um, the one you've probably seen the most trailers for is Babylon. This one has been heavily promoted, has kind of an all star cast associated with it. And this is the tale of an outsized ambition and outrageous excess. It traces the rise and fall of multiple characters during an era of unbridled decadence and depravity in Hollywood. The cast here is Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Gene Smart, Olivia Wilde, and J.C. Correas. Some of you know who he is. Um, so that's Babylon. And the next one is Whitney Houston. I Want to Dance with Somebody. And this one is the latest in several years running where we've had multiple biopics for music artists. And so this one is a joyous, emotional, and heartbreaking celebration of the life and music of Whitney Houston, one of the greatest female R&B pop vocalists of all time, tracking her journey from obscurity to musical stardom. And in this case, we have Naomi Ackie is playing Whitney Houston. Stanley Tucci is also in this movie, as is Ashton Sanders, Tamara Tooney. So Rob, you got a couple of interesting releases to go along with the continued run of Avatar. What do you make of them?
So first of all, we got to address the cat in the room because my
Hmm.
children will be very disappointed that you did not bring up Puss in Boots, which also comes out Christmas Day.
Does it? It did not show up
Yeah,
on the release calendar, so I must have missed that one. My bad.
it does. Antonio Banderas in shambles. Yes, I know because my children want to go see it on Christmas Day.
Yes. Okay.
Um, but I Babylon looks very interesting, but also looks. I mean, I like long dramas, but I'm not so sure I want to spend the movie's over 3 hours.
Yeah.
In a movie theater. I might wait till it comes out and watch it in my own. I not super interested in Want to Dance with Somebody, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. If you are, let's just put it this way, if you're going to the theaters, the likelihood you will be spending over 3 hours in the theater this weekend is pretty high given what movies are out. Yes, Avatar has a 3 hour and 10 minute running time. Babylon at a 3 hour and 8 minute running time. We might have to revisit the discussion about proper length of movies because apparently nobody seems to care anymore.
I mean, one of the main reasons that I am tired, as mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, is that I made the very wise decision to go see Avatar on Monday evening, and the showing was at 8:30, and the movie is 3 hours and 10 minutes long.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I got home after midnight. So
Yes. So to make up for my error earlier, this is the problem is like this movie comes out the 21st, which was like 2 days ago. So
okay.
they're releasing everything all kinds of different days this week, which makes it hard to track. Okay. But Puss in Boots, of course, is a The second in the series, it's The Last Wish. Puss in Boots discovers that the passion for his adventures has taken its toll. He has burned through 8 of his 9 lives. Puss sets out to on an epic adventure to find the mystical last wish and restore his 9 lives. And
Mm.
this has Antonio Banderas as Puss in Boots, Selma Hayek as Kitty Softballs, Harvey Guillen as Perro, and Florence Pugh as Goldilocks. So there you go. Kids movie, running it at a nice crisp 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah, and you have to think there'll be a delineation here where parents with younger kids will probably go see Puss in Boots, and parents with like teenage and older kids will probably go see Avatar.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, I mean, Puss in Boots won't make a ton of money, but I still think it'll make a decent amount of money because it'll be the Christmas movie that the parents with the young kids go see.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's kind of got that category kind of all to itself for Christmas this year. Uh, Along with that, for me, it's weird because I'm having a hard time getting a read on Babylon as to whether or not it seems intriguing to me, uh, whether or not I'm going to like the style or the tone or the feel of it. There are parts of it that I'm like, oh, that seems interesting. And parts of it like, I don't know. Um, it kind of reminds me, there have been several films done recently that kind of speak to previous eras of Hollywood. You have Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, um, from Quentin Tarantino, and you had Hail Caesar from the Coen brothers. And so those were both films that were basically about Hollywood of a different era. This seems to be another in that genre. However, I don't know a ton about the director in this case, which is, as I look it up here again, it's his name is Damien Chazelle,
Hmm.
and he's done La La Land. He wrote La La Land, Whiplash, and he was a producer on First Man. Did the screenplay for 10 Cloverfield Lane. So he does, I mean, he's put out some pretty good movies. So I don't know. I'm having a hard time getting a read. Usually I get a feel whether I like it or not. And I'm just having a hard time getting a read on Babylon.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at a 3 hour drama, it's going to be hard to know for sure. And I think it's really hard to condense into like a trailer
Yeah.
that is intriguing. So I
And
wanted to things.
we'll get to this when we get into Avatar a little bit, but like better have a good reason why your movie has to be over 3 hours long. I mean, we're not talking about like an epic war adventure here. I mean, 3 hours seems a bit decadent for a movie where you don't understand immediately why it's being 3 hours.
Maybe that's the whole point of the movie.
Maybe. Who knows? All right. Well, that's what's coming out in the box office this weekend. You of course have Avatar still in there, Babylon, Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody, and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. So now let's move on to our discussion topic. And the first discussion topic this week will be our breakdown of Avatar: The Way of Water. So we both had the opportunity to see it this week. Both of us saw in IMAX 3D. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So we both saw in IMAX 3D. How we do our normal reviews is we will give you an initial spoiler-free breakdown where we'll just give you basics about what we thought. And then we'll get into our full breakdown where we analyze the movie itself. All right. So, Rob, what are your initial thoughts about the movie without the spoilers?
I thought that it was really nice to look at, and it was really nice to look at. Um, I think we may discuss just how um, deep the story was, but it certainly was not a groundbreaking story by any stretch of the imagination. Um, there were certainly some cool effects going on. We talked a lot about how they would use the water, and I thought the water was used in some pretty fascinating ways. um, and it looked like it was well done. Like it didn't look cheap. I'm not surprised by that, considering how much they spent on it and how long they took on it. Um, 3 hours long, but I think you could probably argue it didn't need to be that long. But I also don't feel like, to me, I didn't feel like it dragged and dragged. Um, I felt like there was enough action going on. It did seem like there was a lot of family drama kind of stuff. The move, if this makes any sense, and we can break this down a little bit more when we get into the fuller breakdown. But the movie felt in some parts very very big, and in some parts very very small.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm interested in discussing that a little more, but I'm not really sure how I felt about that. But that's kind of how I took it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say the movie wildly succeeded on some things and, in my opinion, wildly failed in others. So if you're breaking it down, you have very high levels on one end, very low levels on another end, so that equates out to a good, a slightly above average good film, um, but not a great film. Um, it is a visually immersive world. If you were hoping to get spectacular visuals and immersive world, you definitely get that. Um, if you were going to see the next great American novel portrayed on the screen, you are not going to get that. Um, but if you came away liking the first one, you will probably come away liking this one. I will say, in my personal recommendation, if you were going to go see this movie, go see it in IMAX 3D. If you can't see it in IMAX, at least go see it in 3D. The visuals are the entire thing you go to this movie for. So take full advantage of every way that in which you can get them to their max capacity. That would be what I would say about this one. Um, yeah, it's interesting. When we get into the breakdown, I'll say more about this. I judge it. I do hold into account its context, meaning that this was 15 years after the first one, and it took him a very very long time to make these, and its running time. So when I evaluate this film, I am taking in those two key elements of context as part of my evaluation. Um, but I think if you want a cinema experience, this is a cinema experience. This is a movie designed to be seen in a theater on a big screen, that's pushing the bounds of technology in terms of what it can do visually. If that's what you're going and expecting, you will definitely get that. And that is the calling card and the highlight of the film. Okay. That is our initial thoughts on this. If you would do not want to hear any more spoilers, now is your spoiler warning. We'll put in the notes how far you have to skip ahead in the podcast to get past this section. But we will now get into spoilers and our full breakdown of the movie. All right, Rob. As we look at this, how do you want to start? Do we want to talk about what we like? Um, where do you want to start out this one?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
All right, let's go with what we liked.
Um, I liked the fact that it expanded the universe of the world, because one thing I was wondering was how in the world are you going to make three more movies out of this?
Yeah.
Um, and I think in order to do that, you had to develop some intrigue and some some plot lines in the world itself that didn't revolve just around the humans are coming, the humans are bad.
Mhm.
And whether or not it was super successful at that, it did do that. And I felt one thing it did succeed at was giving you another group of people who are closely related to the protagonist but are different enough that it can develop some storylines moving forward, and did throughout the movie. So
Hmm.
that's what I liked about it. Obviously, we mentioned the visuals already, and that was something I really enjoyed. And like you said, I think they took full advantage of the 3D technology in this movie, and it's been a while since I saw a movie in IMAX 3D,
Hmm.
uh, and I would say it was an enjoyable experience, and even some of the more closely shot scenes or more intimate scenes had some pretty nice 3D effects, especially early on when they were in the forest. I thought some of those scenes were just really beautifully crafted,
Hmm.
and I thought the expanse of the scenes in the water was pretty impressive. Also, um, I mean, there were several things I liked about this movie. I'm glad I went and saw it. That being said, I would not go see it again. I think part of that, a main thing to do with that is the runtime, honestly. But um, I thought it was a pleasant experience, and I'm glad that I went and saw it. And it certainly did not discourage me from going to see the ones that come out after this.
Yeah, it's if we're going straight to things we liked, one thing I would say is um it was always going to be interesting to see what he would do and how it would look given the fact that it was so much later. Think about what you saw when in 1999 when The Phantom Menace came out. You saw a very, very different visual world. It was so much more CGI, so much more other things. It didn't have the same look and feel of the movies that came out in the 70s. There's a degree to which you expect that, and a degree to which it was a little over the top. And so you were wondering, would it feel like you were in the similar world using the new technology and the new advances, but feeling like you're in the same way? And I do think he achieved that. And I think partly he achieved that by starting out in the forest and then branching out from that towards the water element, where he could use more full usage of the updated technology. And we talked in our preview podcast about um, how difficult it is to do those type of scenes involving water. And I thought it was the best example I've seen in terms of computer graphics in relation to water, characters being wet, hair, all that sort of stuff. Like the technical aspects of it seem very, very well done, very natural, very smooth. Um, it really did take you and immerse you into the world. That's the word I keep coming back to, is a very immersive experience. He made sure that you got a full tour of the world, of the ocean, of the villages. He really, really did. And that was his crowning achievement, is to show you an expansive visual world, and in that, I think he very much succeeded. Um, that was always the thing about the first movie, is everyone went because of the visuals. And so he set a high bar for himself with the visuals. And I think if you went in looking for that type of experience, you got it. And so I don't think there was any issue in terms of him being able to deliver on the visual aspect of this film.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you liked in particular?
Mm, I mean, I thought the acting was pretty good overall.
Mhm.
Um, Certainly could have been worse. Um,
True.
um, I do think they did a good job of displaying family dynamics throughout the story, especially being an older brother. Um, I I could really relate to some of the older brother, younger brother scenes throughout the movie because they seemed very familiar to me. Making fun of each other, pushing each other. helping each other, all those things. Um, so that was one thing I was wondering going into it was
Mhm.
uh, where are they going to be with this? Like, do they have a family now? Like, what's the family look like? And turned out that was like one of the main parts of the whole movie.
Mhm.
I think they did a decent job of those family dynamics being portrayed.
Okay, let's uh let's get into critiques. Things that you weren't as thrilled with.
I'll let you start with this one.
Okay. Um, so for me, it begins and ends with the fact that in 3 hours and 10 minutes, I think the story was virtually non existent. Um, the amount of time and energy of those 3 hours and 10 minutes dedicated to actually advancing a legitimate plot was very, very small. Um, and I will break it down into kind of two ways. There's one way to do it and say that this is a story driven movie. Um, it is you see a story progress from one thing to another. Um, there's advances. There's narration. There's plot. There's very very little plot in this movie. Basically, the the humans are bad. The Navi are good. The humans want to kill Jake Sully. In particular, this one group wants to kill Jake Sully, and he goes and runs and hides. So that's the whole plot of the movie. Like, there's not any more plot than that. Is that the humans are back, the humans are bad, and they want to kill Jake Sully, and he goes and hides. Now, there's another way to tell a story. If you're not going to do a story that advances a plot forward, you can do a character driven story in which you explore characters and you delve into um, character dynamics. It seemed like he was leaning more in that direction. You talked a little bit about the family dynamic in this. However, I feel like he really failed in that front. And I would say that from the standpoint of it was not well thought out. There was a couple of characters that had interesting arcs. The younger brother had an interesting arc, and they made some interesting characters about him. He was the person I think who had the most development of any character in the entire film. Um, so if they had more characters along those lines, I think that would be helpful. They didn't. They gave some minorly interesting stuff to the adopted daughter, um, and they had some interesting things along her lines, but they barely explored them at all. And this is one of the things where I come at it and it's like you had 3 hours and 10 minutes, and you had plenty of time if you wanted to increase those dynamics, and they just didn't. And I didn't feel like any of the main characters had any sort of major arc. I mean, they tried to give they kind of shoehorned an arc for Sully in there where he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have run," but they kind of threw that in at the end. You could tell that's what they were kind of setting up, but they really didn't. I didn't feel like they landed on that at all. Um, I'll stop there and let you comment.
Yeah, the word that I comes to mind when you talk through that is scattered.
Yeah,
I felt like there was a lot of different threads being put out that didn't necessarily come back together to tie the story together.
mm-hmm.
Um, I think that, and we talked about this briefly before we recorded. It's worth bringing up that I think that one thing that made it difficult to necessarily connect with everything is he threw you into the story in a way that was basically like you just watched the first one, so
Yeah,
you know who all these people are. And I think for a lot of people going to see this movie, that's not going to be the case
yeah,
because they're not going to be coming off of just seeing the first one. And because of that, I think some of what he was hoping to be emotional impact throughout the movie doesn't have as much resonance.
yeah.
because you just don't care as much about the characters as maybe you would have if it said come out like 2 years after
Yeah.
the original movie.
And along with it, I felt like he really, really, really rushed the opening of this movie to basically fast forward you 15 years into the future. He did that in like 5 minutes. No, it was probably like 10 or 15, but like it was really, really fast. It felt like it went boom, 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 boom. Now let's get on with our story. So I think that felt initially, it felt jarring, I think is one way to put it. It felt like you're just getting reacquainted with this world and he's warp speeding you through everything you've missed and bringing you on to the next thing. And so it just felt it. Yeah, it felt. It had. I like the word scattered. I think that's good.
And we talked about this before particularly when it comes to science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you give the audience?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to give them everything, make them feel like they're dumb.
Right.
Also, don't want to give them too little so they can't understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we were looking at this in like a pendulum, I think it swung a little bit too far towards the not giving them enough
Yeah.
aspect at the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm. And I think like, and this is where I keep coming back to the movie is 3 hours and 10 minutes. You had plenty of time if you wanted to develop some of these threads that you threw out there, and he just didn't. And so, with how long it took him to make these movies and how long the runtime was, I don't feel like there's a lot of excuse for not doing that. Um, to give an example, they quickly throw out a thread about the one their adopted daughters. I'm blanking on the names of these characters, but their adopted daughter. Basically, they're like, "Oh yeah, she became pregnant from her mother's. She birthed from her mother's avatar. We don't know how. Moving on." like what? Like what? And the only time they explore this is like in a scene where they're joking around about who her father was,
Yeah.
and it's just like, like you just threw something in there, like a random avatar gets pregnant, and nope, don't worry about it. Just ignore that. Um, and then and then at one point, like you can tell she's different, and she's a little bit outcast. She has this unique connection with nature, and she's always kind of wondering what that is and where it's coming and why she's different. And then all of a sudden, she's just manipulating nature.
Mm-hmm.
How does she know how to do that? Where did that come from? Uh, Not explored, not bothered with.
Yeah. One thing that I was a little frustrated with story wise was like the sudden appearance of the whale, the whaling crew. Like because when they first appeared, you're like, I don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
And to make it
Well,
even more confusing, Jermaine Clement is speaking in an American accent, which I don't think I've ever heard him do. And I was very confused because I was
well,
like, that looks a lot like Jermaine Clement, but that does not sound like him.
well, and that speaks to a larger issue with the storyline is very briefly in the beginning, they're like, oh, the humans are back. And then you get like one sentence of dialogue saying, hey, we're back and we're mining and we're doing everything really fast this time. We got to subdue the population. And like that's all you're given. Like you don't get any sort of sense as to, their where they are, what they're doing, why they're back, how this is transpiring in the world at large. You're just kind of like, hey, they're here. Okay, moving on. And so the fact that a random, essentially whaling ship, as it were, shows up is kind of par for the course on how everything was done in this movie in terms of the plots.
Yeah, in some ways, it felt like some aspects of the plot were just not explained in the right order.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's just his vision or editing or what, but I feel like I do feel like if this movie was a little bit shorter and some of the sequences were in a different order, it might have been a slightly better movie. But I think you can say that about a lot of movies. So I
Yeah.
think,
Or even why, like, even why they send, like, they don't, I mean, you can kind of imply why this one random group of people who apparently died and it's just their avatars remaining, why they're on like a very long, vengeful mission, to track down one particular individual. Um, they kind of give you as an idea of what's going on and why that is, or, like why they're just allowed to run around for a very long time on a revenge mission. But, they don't really get into it that much. It's just supposed to just accept it and be done with it. I don't know. I thought too, like several of the characters were just very underdeveloped. I'll give an example. I think the older brother was was basically like, I mean, he had basically no personality. They didn't spend any time on his arc whatsoever, other than the fact that he was, stereotypical older brother. And so the problem with that is then later when he dies, you don't really feel an emotional connection to this guy. The only emotional connection you have is to the other characters and how that death affects them. You're not actually moved by the death of the older brother. And so, in some ways, it's almost like they killed the wrong character because they didn't spend any time having you develop any emotional connection to this guy.
yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Yep. Yeah, because I know that I didn't feel much of a reaction to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the closest thing you can get to is the reaction of the younger brother. Like the only thing they set up the whole time was the younger brother keeps getting the older brother in trouble. The younger brother keeps getting the older brother in trouble. But how the older brother dies is in trying to, save their, is when the younger brother says, "Hey, let's save, the human who's kind of their unofficial son." Like
Mm-hmm.
that's already a worthy cause. Like that's that's not him getting him into trouble. He like that would be a place where if you're trying to really develop an emotional arc, the younger brother goes off half cocked, does something stupid, gets his older brother killed, and now that's the turning point for that character. Like that's an emotional arc you can get behind, but they didn't go that direction. Um, and that leads me to one of my other pet peeves on this one is that the whole idea of there's this human character who has been left there, who basically runs around with the Sully family. Um, and the whole aspect of the film is centered around like his whole line about Sully stick together, and then this guy like they just leave him
Yeah.
and just run off without this guy who's like tangentially a member of their family, and they just leave him for however long. Then later they decide, oh no, he is a member of our family, he is valuable, now we need to go get him. Then the mother like basically attempts to kill him, you know later in the movie. And then he shows up back on the shore with them at the end, like nothing happened. And they don't even address the fact that the mother just tried to like basically sacrifice him. Like, what is
See,
that?
I kind of thought they were gonna go a way where because he felt like they turned their back on him, he was gonna go side with his dad. But
Yeah.
I kind of felt like that would have been a little cheap because like his dad was trying to kill him for the whole other part of the movie. So
Yeah.
why it switching around completely change how he feels about people he has been living with for like 13 years.
Yeah.
But they didn't end up doing that. So I'm wondering if like that was just planting a seed for them to do something like that in the future. Like I don't what you said about not developing the characters enough to have emotions. Like I don't have a super strong emotional connection to any character in this movie, like to the point where I'm desperate to know what's going to happen to them in the next one.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I
Yep.
I will go watch it and I'll probably enjoy it, but I'm not like I really I don't care a whole lot
Yeah.
about what going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the number one failing. And that's where I say, like, if you're not going to do a plot like a super interesting plot and you're going to go the character route, then you better develop some serious emotional attachment to the characters and really want to care about their development. And he doesn't do either. Like he doesn't achieve
I mean,
either.
I would contrast this with the new Star Wars trilogy, which you could argue is if it's good or bad. It's probably not great, but the one thing that they did achieve, J.J. Abrams and Ryan Johnson, I felt like they achieved was they actually did make you care about several of the characters. I think people cared about Finn. I think people cared about Poe Dameron. I think people cared about Rey. Whether they ended up liking where those characters went is another story.
Mhm.
But I do think there was actual reason to care about each of those characters.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that same kind of pull in this series right now.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's where I go. Like, there's always the out of saying, well, he's just throwing stuff out there to develop in later films. Maybe, but you don't like the one example of a very clear thread that they are obviously developing for a later film. The the human kid saves his father's avatar from death, and that avatar goes off and is still alive at the end of the film. That's a clearly illustrated thread that this guy is coming back and you're going to see this guy again. Like that's a something where it's very obvious that they're setting something up for the next films. Basically, we're trying to fill in the gaps of saying he didn't do this. Is that maybe for next film? Maybe. I don't know. Um, so I think it was hard to tell like what was setting up for later films. Um, and secondly, like I think if you look at it from the perspective, it really seems like in this James Cameron cared very, very, very deeply about giving you an experience and not so much about giving you a story. And so it feels a lot more like a nature documentary, you know,
Mm-hmm.
than it does anything else. Um, you get some characters, like, hey, here's the penguins, here's what they're doing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It feels a lot more like a nature documentary than it does like an actual film. So, I mean, nature documentaries are interesting. So, I will say that, like, if we go back to one thing I did like, I say, even though it was 3 hours and 10 minutes and I didn't think much of the story, I didn't feel like I was bored.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you there. It didn't feel like I was bored. I wasn't sitting there like, when is this movie going to be over? And that's a testament to how good the immersive experience is. Um, but I just think like if you are evaluating it as a holistic movie, the failings on the story side are substantial. And it really does bring down the amazing accomplishments that he achieved on the visual and experience side of it. Not to the point of making it a bad film. It just keeps it from being a really good film.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you see going forward?
Um, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more of the dynamics between um, the forest Navi and the water Navi, and I wonder if there will be. I kind of almost think there's got to be another one or two different factions that we're gonna meet in the next couple movies.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think by necessity the storyline is going to have to shift a little bit towards that because it can't just be them against the humans for every single movie.
Yeah.
And I do think there were some, like you said, planting seeds. I do think there were certainly some seeds of tension between Jake and the leader of the water um, tribe set up that could be expounded on.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, whether they have done that enough justice to make that believable, I don't know, but I do think that he tried to set that up
Yeah.
a little bit throughout this movie. So that's what I envision there being more inter tribal, I guess you want to say, storylines coming through in the next couple movies here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, we will wrap that up as our Avatar Way of Water review. And let's move on to we'll just spend a couple minutes with this being Christmas week. Just want to talk a little bit about Christmas plans. Like what are some family traditions you had at Christmas growing up, and what are some things we do now? Doesn't have to be movie related, just something for Christmas.
So when I was a kid growing up, we always had coffee cake for Jesus on Christmas morning.
Ah,
So
interesting.
we were not allowed to even look at the tree until
Mm,
coffee cake for Jesus. And my dad read the Christmas story
okay.
to, you know, our present opening was pretty orderly. We went in turns, and I've since found out that's not how it goes everywhere. I've been in places where it's a free for all. I've been in places where someone gets their whole stack of presents and they open up their whole stack of presents.
Mm.
One, but we would always do one present at a time, and youngest to oldest, and then just keep going around in the circle. Throw one mom and dad's way every once in a while if we
Hmm.
felt like it, because we're important. Um, and something that I've done now several years is going with my wife and kids to a movie on Christmas Day, as you
Nice.
mentioned. Lots of people do that, and we are some of those lots of people. And we will probably end up going to see Puss in Boots
Hmm.
because I don't think my kids are going to want to sit through a 3 hour movie.
No.
I don't think, I, perhaps a better way to rephrase that is I don't think I want to sit with my kids through a 3 hour movie. So,
That sounds very fair.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um,
Also,
yeah.
this year, I mean, this is not Christmas Day, but this is tangential
Hmm.
to the Christmas, and Knives Out, Glass Onion premieres on Netflix tomorrow,
Ah, that's
and
right.
I will be watching that as part of my Christmas weekend festivities.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That is a big release. So if you did not catch it in its 1 week in theaters, you definitely want to do that. For me, I think growing up, the couple things for a number of years, for a long time, we did my dad's family on Christmas Eve. Then first thing in the morning, we did our thing as a family, and then we did my mom's side on later in the day on Christmas Day. And so like just that compact like day and a half right there. That was a tradition I ended up really, really enjoying. And um, especially growing up, like, constantly being around the family and having that rhythm is something I remember enjoying quite a bit. Um, we would, my brother and I would often sleep in the same room. We had separate rooms, once we got old enough, but we'd sleep in the same room for Christmas night and the night before Christmas, Christmas Eve, and then talk about what we think we were getting the next day. Sometimes we were able to guess it, sometimes we weren't. But just the excitement of it, and then trying to decide how long we had to wait before we could yell that it's Christmas and go open our gifts. And there was a few occasions where my parents told me, no, go back to bed. It's not time yet. But they were pretty good about letting us get up pretty early. So that's stuff I remember from being a kid. And now it's like for a number of years, my dad was doing a Christmas Day breakfast when we got older as adults, and he'd cook up like ridiculous amounts of bacon and pancakes, and we'd eat this awesome pancake breakfast and do our gifts as a family. And so now we're trying to decide, like, now this is my first Christmas with my daughter, who's 11 months old. Will be 11 months on Christmas Day. And so what we're just trying to think through what kind of Christmas traditions we want to instill in her as she grows up. Obviously, she's not going to remember this one, but
Hmm.
it does get me thinking about what we want to do and what how we want to make that experience.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely changes a whole lot.
It does. I like your movie on Christmas thing. I like that. Once
Yeah,
once she gets to movie age, maybe I'll have to adopt that one myself.
yeah, yeah. And the nice thing for us is like we've typically let them decide what they want to go see. And I think as they get older, like we continue that tradition, and maybe they'll want to go see a movie like Avatar someday in the future.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, that's just a little bit of Christmas tradition. Now we'll close out with our watch list, movies that we've watched over this past week. So, Rob, aside from Avatar, what'd you watch?
I almost watched a movie called Connect today, and I will tell you why
Hmm.
I watched it. So I bought a ticket to the movie, and I was in the movie theater sitting in my seat, and I saw about 10 minutes of the movie before my wife sent me a text asking to call a doctor because they had a potential opening for my son, who we've been trying to get to see a specialist for something,
Hmm.
and I called and was on hold with Wellspan for half an hour. Um, so at that point, going back into continue watching the movie was seemingly fruitless to me. It was a movie as an Indian movie, so it was dubbed. So I felt like I was going to be completely lost at that point. And I really liked the first 10 minutes of it. It's called Connect, and it just came out the other week. About a family who loses the father of the family as part of COVID because he's a doctor in a hospital in Mumbai, um, and contracts the disease and passes away. And the from there, it's about the daughter trying to reconnect with him through like an exorcism seance kind of type situation. So it looked like it was going to be pretty fascinating. Started to just about kick off when I had to leave. So I'm not super thrilled. I spent $15 to watch 10 minutes of a movie,
Yeah.
but I guess that's going to happen sometimes because family is the priority when it comes to those kinds of situations. I also watched. I don't know if I would classify it as a movie or a TV show, but on Disney Plus there is a version of the Nutcracker that just came out called the Hip Hop Nutcracker.
Hmm.
It has Rev Run from Run DMC is the narrator, the
Hmm.
rap writer, I guess you could call it. And my kids rather enjoyed it, and I thought it was pretty cool to see some other cultural things. So that was enjoyable to watch. If you have kids who like music, if you're into hip hop at all, the Hip Hop Nutcracker was a good watch, and that's on Disney Plus. And then, obviously, as I mentioned before, I'm very excited to watch Glass Onion again tomorrow because I really enjoyed watching it in the theater, and I'm looking forward to seeing it again.
Nice. Very nice. This was the week where I watched Home Alone. So my annual watching of Home Alone. And this year it just made me like, oh man, I should have found a way to get tickets to go see the Philadelphia Symphony perform that soundtrack live.
Mm.
But it's a classic. I love it. It's not the type of movie they make anymore, and it hits all the right notes. I've said this before, like Kevin was exactly the same age I was at that when that movie came out. So I feel like I resonate with that in ways that maybe not everybody does. Um, but it's my favorite, and it still remains a classic to this day. The second thing I did, and I have to credit Chris McQuarrie, who's been the director of the last number of Mission Impossible films, and a film legend in his own right. I follow him on Twitter, and he was in an exchange about someone when he talked about the fact that Mission Impossible Fallout has a special feature where it's a score isolated version of the movie.
Hmm.
And basically, you watch the movie and you see the visuals, but the only thing you hear is the score. No dialogue, no action sounds, nothing. You see the film and you have the score. And I'm like, "Ooh, this sounds like a fascinating study in the power of the score and getting a deeper look at what a score does to a movie." So I started watching. I got like half hour, 40 minutes in. I haven't finished it yet, but it's really fascinating. Um, because it really gives you an idea of how much is driven by the score and the degree, the tightness to which the score is cued to the movie.
Mm,
Like a door slams shut and there's a specific loud thump in the background of the score. Like you feel the score is being laid out that precisely. A car hits the gas and you feel that with the direction of the movie going right alongside it. um, that is pretty amazing, the degree to which that happens. Also, there's periods where it's just silent, and so when you're not hearing any dialogue or anything, it really is apparent, like it's silent. So it's really trying to draw you into the visuals. It really does make a fascinating experience. I don't know if it's going to be for everybody to sit there and watch a movie where you're not hearing anybody say anything and just listening to the score, but it's fascinating to watch, especially if you're going to want to kind of do something in the background. So Mission Impossible Fallout in the special features has that option.
nice.
All right. Well, that is the show, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for tuning in to Film for Fans and wishing every single one of you a Merry Christmas. And make sure you watch Die Hard and Home Alone before New Year's. That's my charge to you. But check out filmforfans.com, like, subscribe, tell your friends, and until next time, enjoy the movies.